Fruit coming from the orchard is often, to a lesser or greater degree, contaminated with fungal spores. These spores are all around us and will cling to any surface and wait for the right conditions to start propagating. Citrus fruit are vulnerable to 14 common post-harvest pathogens that can infect the fruit and destroy its internal and external quality. It is important that fruit is treated to kill the spores and to inhibit infection and loss of quality. The main weapon used in the packhouse to fight these pathogens is the hot water fungicide bath. The effectiveness of this treatment depends on three main factors. These are the temperature of the water in the bath, the concentrations of the fungicides used, and the contact time of the fungicide mixture with the fruit. The fungicide treatment leaves a residue on the fruit that protects the fruit during transit to the overseas market, and the residue will be insufficient if any of these factors mentioned before are neglected.
We use a hot water fungicide bath. Most of the pack houses in the industry use hot water fungicide baths. Some prefer to use a cold water bath, but we prefer them to use the hot water bath because hot water serves three purposes. It helps with the drying of the fruit prior to waxing, at the uptake of the fungicide into injury points where there could be an already established infection, and then also the activity of the fungicides is more efficient in a hot water system. It's important to have the fungicides baths set at the right temperatures, because years gone by, 10 years ago, we were recommending temperatures of 40 degrees early in the season. But things have changed through the years with the environmental conditions, and we're seeing more and more rind conditions on the fruit, and fruit is becoming more and more sensitive to these rind conditions. We've decided to drop the temperature down to between 30 and 35 degrees. Another important aspect of this fungicide bath treatment is that the exposure time of the fruit in the bath. The fruit is coming through from the washing system and going directly into the fungicide bath, and it has to be exposed in that bath where you make up your mixture of your fungicides. To get the right residue on your fruit, must be exposed in the bath for sufficient time. The industry recommendation is a minimum of 1 minute and longer. Unfortunately, when baths were developed and introduced into the industry, baths weren't properly researched. Most baths in citrus pack houses are too short, so the exposure time in some baths are 15 to 30 seconds, which is reflected in the residue that is eventually left on the fruit. And history has shown us that throughout the years, in the usage of these baths, the residue is too low on the fruit, which is not the ideal situation. We need to set the right type of residue so the fungicide can do the work properly on the fruit during in transit overseas to the overseas markets. The fungicides cost a lot of money. Pack houses have complained about the cost of replenishing the bath on a daily basis. So the whole idea is to get your fruit in there as clean as possible. My point of contention is the washing systems are the first line of attack. We need to get the fruit into the fungicide baths as clean as possible. Then maybe with a push, pack houses can run a week with a clean fungicide bath and change it on a weekly basis. But at the end of the day, if you have any shortcuts at the beginning of before the fruit is packed for the overseas market, and your fruit arrives in the overseas market in a poor condition, poor quality fruit, highly infected fruit, full of waste, who's going to pay for it at the end of the day? Comes back to the pack house.
The most commonly used fungicides in the hot water fungicide bath are guazetine and imazolol. By treating fruit with a too low fungicide concentration, we allow fungi population to develop resistance. The same applies to contact time and temperature. The industry recommendation is a contact time of at least 1 minute at a temperature of 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, using a concentration of 500 parts per million imazolol and or guazetine at a concentration of 1,000 parts per million.
We're dealing with about 14 plus minus 12 to 14 different post-harvest pathogens, and we have 3 or 4 fungicides to take care of these pathogens. So the pack house is an option. In a number of years ago, we were recommending 2 different fungicides in the bath. Our major fungicide is imazolol, which is the most important fungicide. It takes care of your green and blue mold infections, and we are now seeing a build-up of resistance to this fungicide. So we have to have other strategies in place. So we introduced guazitine into the bath as well, which is a fungicide primarily for sour rot, but it is very effective against green and blue mold as well. You have two different fungicides together in a mixture, which is the preferred way to go to prevent resistance from building up. They're both effective against green and blue mold. They both have different modes of action, and it's ideal for the one fungicide to knock out imazole resistant spores coming into the system, and vice versa, guazitine resistant spores coming into the system. The imazole hopefully can knock those out as well.
It's recommended that you top up the fungicide after a specific amount of fruit has gone through the bath. For example, if you were to pack 60 tons of fruit per day, you could divide this amount into 3 and top up after every 20 tons. Top up according to the stipulated concentration of fungicide to water ratio.
With a mixture of the two fungicides, we cannot do the titration, and we can't measure the concentration of the fungicides in the system. So then we rely on topping up procedures, and a topping up procedure was worked out in the industry, and pack houses have been a topping up procedure. Also, again, based on the certain amount of tonnage through the bath, and topping up procedure, and that's worked fairly well. It's a bit of a thumb suck situation where you don't exactly know what you got the right concentration on your fruit, but it has been working pretty well over the years.
A procedure has now become available where the concentrations of both imazolol and guazitine in a bath can be tested. This is done by firstly separating the two components and then by using a titration procedure to determine the separate concentrations. If these tests cannot be performed, then other options are available.
We've recommended pack houses use imazole in the bath on its own, do the titration, top up according to titration, and manage our most important fungicide in the bath on its own. Then going to the wax and applying the rest of your fungicides in the wax. So we're withdrawing guazitine out of the fungicide bath, putting it in the wax, and using imazole on its own and managing the proper effect of your main fungicide, which is imazole.
Inadequate treatment with fungicides leads to an insufficient residue on the fruit and increases the development of fungal spore populations that are resistant to a certain fungicide. It is therefore important that this critical step be monitored effectively through titration, and that adjustments are made at regular intervals to ensure the efficiency of the fungicides used. It must also be kept in mind that certain markets prohibit the use of certain fungicides, and all regulations concerning the use of fungicides must be thoroughly researched before the packing season begins.